Hey, so from the views counts on my videos, I know that some people saw what I did yesterday, put up yesterday on my YouTube channel, which was a little looking into a number that is most conventionally known as 666 or 666 as they call it, which in terms of decimal numbers turns out to be fourgrosssevendozensix, and to my big surprise is actually one of the spherical numbers, meaning out of the many numbers that were shape of space-time, be it in linear, triangular, four eyes, what they call tetrahedral, or 8 eyes, octahedral, or dozen and 8 eyes, 2 dozen 8 eyes, the vector equilibrium, and icosahedral numbers, and many others. I've got a reservoir, a table where I've put a big number of all these numbers in to just have them available, which originally came from the fact that I found that if I took a 4 eyes out of paper or cardboard, I could simply drop those beads that I'm working with into these. And this one isn't perfect because it's not meant to do this job, but now for demonstration this should be fine. Oops, there goes the bead. So this, they fall in there. They fall in there and then self-organize into the shapes of the 4 eyes. I'm gonna find that one later. Oh, there. Yeah. By dropping spheres into a 4 eyes like this, the spheres self-organize into 4 eyes, which in turn means that if I can look at the top layer of that 4 eyes, I can discern the number of spheres in it by counting the spheres around the edge and looking up in my table the related number of spheres in the whole thing. Alright, and in this table I found this number 666, fourgrosssevendozensix, and it turns out it is the number of spheres in a triangle that has 3 dozen spheres along the edge. And 3 dozen is 6 times 6. So 6 to the triangle is 3 dozen, to the triangle is 9 dozen, and in there, I showed this yesterday as a bit of a look into that, where I shifted the frequency a little, because if you have 3 dozen spheres along the edge, there's one less, is 2 dozen 11, that's the number of steps between the spheres, the intervals, and that's the frequency. Now if we shift to the frequency of 3 dozen, so we are adding 1 sphere along the edge, the number of triangles in that big triangle, turns out that the small triangles in the big triangle that point in the same way as the big one, that's then our friend 666, fourgrosssevendozensix, whereas the inverse, the small triangles that go the other way around here, those are fourgrosssevendozensix, which is 216, and both together make 9 gro, which is 1296. Okay, so that was just a quick recap where I was yesterday. Besides that, I also showed this thing, and that's gonna come in a second once more. This being a little 8 eyes tree ship of sorts, small scale tree ship that I shared in another video, the process of tying this together. And here is my follow-up on this, because the reason I drew these is because when I find a number like this and I want to make sense of it, I don't get far if I only do it in here. So instead I want to get to hold, to play with the real thing, so that I can get to know that, get to know its behaviors. However, I haven't had, at least in the size that I wanted, I haven't had enough beads left to make the full thing with all the fourgrosssevendozensix, the 666 beads in there. I mean, you know, if I buy 1,000 beads and take that many out of them, then that's a lot of them. So I didn't have enough left of those, but what I did instead was to play with the fractals here. So what you can see coming into frame here, that's a big triangle with, in this case, well, if we're looking at this in terms of the overall frequency of the big triangle here, we have this being a small triangle. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those, so it's 6 times 6. In other words, 3 dozen triangles in this altogether. Now, if we took 2 of these, that's a dozen. So every one of these 2 frequency triangles here has a dozen beads, and so forth. And in total, the number of beads along any one of the large edges is indeed 3 dozen. So while this is not completely filled in with all the beads that would be filling in these eyes, this is kind of the embrace of those fourgrosssevendozensix, the 666 beads. So if I did indeed have all the beads necessary in this size, I could put this on the ground somewhere and fill in all of these triangles with the beads, and then the total number of beads in this thing would be indeed that number, 666. Okay, so, you know, that's a lot of talk about this, but what I really love about this is, on one hand, it kind of goes to show a little more about the fractals in here. Like, I love the fact that this has a 2 frequency hex in it, in between here, right? So that's 2 dozen eyes in there, and then there's 3 times 4 around, which is another dozen. So altogether, again, 3 dozen. And I love how this, you know, kind of lends itself to folding a little like this. Here's the 4 eyes. And well, I had no other purpose for this thing, you know. I made it so I could get to know this number, basically, even though it's a shortcut, because again, it's not the complete number of spheres present. Maybe I'm going to do that in a smaller scale. I might have enough beads left in that scale. But here's where this one comes back in. Because I had these 2 lying next to one another, and I wondered, well, how would they go together? And it turns out surprisingly well. So I put these tiny little strings on the corners of this, both on the outside corners and the corners of the inside triangle here. And with those, what we can do is we can put this triangle membrane into our structure here, our tree ship. And I'm gonna see, this is the first time I'm trying this in this way, because the last time I tied it in, I just simply tied it in and I wasn't bothering with what I'm doing now, where I tried to get these loops over there again. But it shouldn't take forever. I hope you have the moment time. So you see, I drew the loop in through the leaky corner of the tree ship here, and then I can put the loop over one of the pieces of branch. It's one of these wooden fingers, like so, and I'll do that with the other ones as well. And they do have knots that can be moved, so basically adjustable tensionable knots. And once I have these all, this is not the perfect tool for the job, it would seem. Where damn it, go? Well, I may end up speeding up this section of the video. I'll see if I can manage that, because I can't promise how long this fiddly bit is taking. Always takes time, and it does not shorten the time if I haste myself, if I hurry myself. Indeed, usually that leads to the inverse. There's a slight chance of getting it put together a little faster than if I just took my time. And there's much higher chance of me messing it up along the way, having to do it all over again. So no hurry, just don't worry about that. Halfway there, and perhaps, you know, the process might be of some value to those watching. I can't tell, because I only know whatever feedback you give me of what you make of all these things. But I am very grateful for the fact that indeed there is a number of people who do give feedback every now and then, and who do actually seem to value these little insights into the sphere of my mind. The minds of my spheres. Almost. I think there's one more to go. Nope. Nope. last one. Well, and after that I would usually probably take a little time and tune it insofar as I can tighten these loops so that the bead triangle that I'm putting in here is actually under tension. I mean, it is under tension already, but you know, kind of tuned into the overall tension of the system. That would still be a little more potentially than what this has right now, because I took out some tension in order to take off these loops of the wood. There we go. Cool. So what we now have, the question of which side is the knot sliding on. If any. There. And there. There. That might not have been the right one. There we go. You know, the day I found out about the taut line hitch, midshipman's hitch, I think. Ah, that was a good day. Learning that there actually are knots that can be tied under tension, and more than that, they can be adjusted and tensed subsequently. That's a tremendously useful tool. Alright, finally I've come around the thing. I've tied all the corners tightly, and what we have now is a, yeah, I suppose it's a basket of sorts. It's just a beautiful thing to hold and behold. And it also, if we consider it still as a scale model of a tree ship, you know, if I think of this having being suspended from a tree somewhere, and people can get in here and chill in this side, this part of it, or get on the top and hang out on that. I don't know about you, but I would like that very much. Well, no. Anyways, for a change, I'm gonna give you a little more time to look at this in a little calm here, because I noticed that I have a tendency of doing my videos where I take a long time for the process just to rush through the presentation of the outcome, which perhaps isn't fair in a way. But on the other hand, the process is really where it's at, you know, and it's a beautiful truth about synergetics and this kind of play with the spheres, that indeed, in the end, we are left with something beautiful to get to hold and touch and interact and dance and play with. And that in itself is reason enough, isn't it? Okay, I wish you a great day, and I hope you enjoyed this little consideration of a coincident of sorts, because these kinds of constellations are not something that I am intending to do. Like when I created this tree ship, you can go back to the video and look at it, that the reason why these wooden fingers here, these vectors, have that particular size is not because I decided to do it that way, but because this is something that was left over of a tree that a dead tree that I've actually chopped down with an axe, which I have not much experience with, to be honest. But there was that little bit of the trunk left after I chopped it off, so I sawed that off. I split it with another axe into a dozen pieces, rounded them off, and tied them together, turning it into this structure. And at no point did I ever take a measure of this wood. And then I'm doing this completely unrelated process of playing with this number, really, with this shape of this number, and get this beautiful structure out of it, the bead thing. And once I'm done with it, I have the two sitting side by side, and I'm wondering, you know, they look quite tuned to one another. I mean, if I showed this to anyone, chances would be that they look at it and say, aha, so it was clearly intended that the length of these fingers here was the same as the length of the edge of this triangle created from these particular beads, which have 12 millimeters in diameter, a dozen millimeters in diameter. So it turns out that the length between this knot and that is about, this is 6 times 3, a dozen and 6 decimeter. I've got a ruler here with a scale of decimeters. So here, between the steps here, this 1, 2, 3, 4, between those is a dozen millimeters. Yeah, so that's the size of these beads, and with that we kind of know that the length of this is about 1.5 dozen decimeters. Who would have thunk? Alright, enough. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you soon, and peace.